真的很喜欢推特，到现在10年发了已经快18000个推。
Elon especially has declared open war on the dominant left.
These platforms are not used for forums for disinformation.
And they are not going to let him, go quietly and go back to the way things were before he said he wanted to buy Twitter.
There's more that needs to be done, and there's a lot of bipartisan interest in that.
And so now you see sort of elite culture is rallying together to go against anything owned by Musk.
他的常识看到这个荒谬的程度，变成这个样子，所以马斯克用他的本能、他的坦率和他的实力来抵抗。极左派真的是撞到一个他们不想碰见的敌人。这个推特现在无论卖不卖掉，他已经是信誉被重创了。
I would love to see nothing more than for Twitter to be taken over.
欢迎收看精英论坛，我是 David。马斯克收购推特不仅引发了巨大的关注，也将马斯克个人卷入了美国的政治漩涡之中。那么，推特在美国的社会和政治领域到底扮演了什么样的角色？马斯克收购推特为什么也兴起了这么大的政治风浪？今天呢，我们就邀请3位嘉宾给我们来讲讲这个说话不按规矩、不讲政治正确、有钱能上天的富豪在推特购买这件事情上，到底在美国甚至全世界造成了什么样的影响？首先介绍的是希望之声广播电台资深主持人方伟先生。
对于马斯克自己的政治站位来说呢，他自己发了一个推很形象哈。他说我在2012年的时候我是中间偏左，到现在2022年的时候，我现在是中间偏右了。他说我啥也没做。I didn't do anything. 我什么也没做，我现在从中间偏左变成偏右。
下一位呢是美国独立调查记者、外交政策分析师 Jordan Schachtel。Yeah,
I think Elon probably knows in a bear market that his offer was overpriced, and I think a lot of people discount his business acumen.
下一位呢是美国军事战略与地缘政治分析师及作者 Brandon Weichert。Look
at the last 2 weeks of all of the negative press. Elon Musk was the equivalent of Tony Stark or Captain or Iron Man. He was this very popular, famous figure who now in about 2 weeks has gone from that to being like this great villain.
Brandon, why do you think Elon wants to buy Twitter?
Well, I think it started out as he was upset that Twitter was censoring his favorite comedy site, the Babylon Bee, and then it sort of escalated from there. And this is a pretty typical move of Elon Musk, where he sort of fixates on one aspect of something he thinks is a problem, makes him sort of this gonzo figure, and then he sort of goes out from there very rapidly to now it's become this whole kind of socio-political movement. But it started with censorship of Babylon Bee, and it has sort of gone beyond that now, rightly so.
方伟先生，我们知道这个推特在美国，其实您也是在推特上一个很专业的用户啊。对这件事情，您看就是推特它在美国这个社会起到一个什么样的作用？
对，推特它的整个的用户是2.2亿咱们假设它的数字是对的哈。那么在这里头有6000万人是美国人，那基本上是美国的成人 adult。所以呢，推特它其实是一个，在我看来，它是个新闻发布平台，它并不是一个怎么讲社交媒体啊，张三找他的朋友啊，找他的家庭来这么聚一聚说话。它是一个美国的叫 influencer 哈，美国的意见领袖，用树状的方式来往下传递讯息的，所以它是一个非常强大的信息发布平台。在我看来，你知道，在美国传媒界有这么一种说法哈，就是说你要影响这个国家，你只要抓住5%的新闻的活跃人士。他们就是他们各自圈子的叫做意见领袖，所以你不需要说服60%、70%的大众，你抓到那5%的人就可以了。可在我看来，这5%的人他就在推特上面，所以它意义非常大。
Jordan, so you personally very active on Twitter. That's sort of how we got engaged in conversations first as well. What do you feel is how has Twitter done for yourself personally when it comes to pushing whatever you write or when it comes to getting ideas across to people?
Yeah, I very much agree with the previous statement. And Twitter, what kind of differentiates it from the likes of a US equivalent of Facebook or something like that, is that Twitter is a place where the US elites in particular push narratives, ideas. Twitter is much more an ideas factory than, say, Facebook, where your grandparents might want to talk about their dog or something like that. Twitter is where I think the global conversation happens, and that's why I enjoy it. And it, as already mentioned, Twitter is a great news aggregator as well. I think it has this unique blend of commentary and newsworthiness that captures a lot of people's attention. And to be in control of Twitter is an enormously influential place to be right now.
Jordan, do you think the numbers reported by Reuters and what Elon believes himself as the fake accounts, what do you make sense of those numbers?
Regardless of how you view how he did business at Tesla and SpaceX, he's turned these companies, the valuation of these companies, all of his companies combined is in the trillions now, while SpaceX is still private. So no serious businessman wants to just buy a platform as like a non-profit project out of the good of their heart. His reputation is on the line. So if he buys, I think he realizes that he probably asked, the price, it was overpriced, and they accepted an overpriced offer. And I think the bots move. I have no idea what the percentage of bots is on Twitter. There are a lot of bots on Twitter. It's tough to get a percentage of it because this is a number, in the hundreds of millions potentially. But I think what he's trying to do is trying to negotiate the price down.
Because the value of Twitter is in the user data, and as well as the ability to influence hearts and minds, as the previous guests were talking about. But from a business perspective, you're buying that data and the ability to trade that data in bulk. And if those accounts that people are using or that are existing in Twitter are in fact a large percentage of them fake, you've just lowered the value, which is why Musk has been beating that drum for the last week and a half or so, and why he's kind of slow walking the purchase, partly slow walking the purchase of Twitter.
方伟先生，对刚才两位嘉宾谈到的，就是马斯克这个买这个公司本身呢，以及现在他想对这个交易这个步骤进行的这么一些influence 或者改动吧，您对这件事情怎么看呢？
说实话，我觉得他现在这个把这个收购暂时叫停哈，有一个重要的原因就是这个股市的下滑。那么另外一方面，当然了，他也是对这个假账号这个事情他是很敏感的。那么推特的这个叫做假账号的比例有多少？我确实认为是远远超过5%，因为他做了一个对公众做了一个这个统计嘛，他就是说大家找一个大 V 哈，略掉前1000个人，后面每10个你挑一个人，最后你做一个100人的 sample。他把这个方法给了这个他的怎么样？他的粉丝拥出去。我就举几个例子啊，一个是有人马上去数《纽约时报》，对，5300万人，对不对？5300万这个粉丝数下来是我还没记错是20%，的假账号。推特上面的是最大的一个所谓的账号叫印度人民党。印度的执政党哈，他有一个账号是几千万人，怎么样？数下来之后也是这个非常高，我要没记错是19.8还是怎么样？
也接近快20了。
对，也有到30%多的。总而言之吧，跟50%差很远。所以呢，你买一个东西，结果呢，人家声称，因为他的月报年报就一直他几年就这么说啊，5%啊，他现在说是5%以下 ，well below 5%，远远在5%以下。那么这就是一个 misstatement。作为一个买家，你要买一个真货。你完全有权利提出来说这个不 make sense， 把我们 straight out 我再来买这个东西，我觉得它是合情合理，对他来说又有利，因为他如果被逼着迅速往前推进的话，你想想看，这个特斯拉现在股票跌到多少？跌到30%，他在特斯拉他买之前4月26号，他的市值，他的财富是1700亿，跌掉30%，510亿没了。他在华尔街借的钱，他是用特斯拉的股票去抵押的，人家抵押不一定是1比1啊，搞不好1比2啊，对他来说是很大的一个压迫。所以呢，他现在把这个震撼弹丢出来，给他有足够多的时间去 sort it out。那么股市我觉得不会一直沉下去，那么就给他运作的空间。我觉得这是非常非常，就是很有看点的一个 move 哈，背后有很多东西。
What do you guys think has been the impact on society for Elon to say I want to buy this giant, Jordan?
It's massive just because what I kind of discussed is that if you control Twitter, you control this narrative shop. And there really is no current mission statement of Twitter under the control of this San Francisco cartel right now, other than to protect the establishment and to protect like these left-wing narratives. Twitter was formed famously to protect free speech and promote free speech on the internet, and under Jack Dorsey's early leadership became wildly successful. But then, all of these politics got involved, and these kind of like social justice warrior types took over Twitter. And now basically every single employee, middle manager of Twitter is like the equivalent of a communist. So Elon Musk, I think, wants to bring back its free speech foundations. And this, of course, poses an enormous threat to both Twitter Inc. as it currently operates, and the global ruling class that is vehemently opposed to free speech.
But Jordan, I thought that the one side of the society is telling me that free speech is against democracy, and free speech is now against the rule of the law.
Mm-hmm. Well, democracy carries several definitions, and what some, I think, leftist operators do when they use the word democracy is they really want to put in place a system of unaccountability and mob rule. And that's a dangerous place to be. I'd much rather Twitter just simply be a platform, not for democracy, majoritarian rule, but for free speech, where every individual's speech is protected.
Yeah, I think that he's right about that. The Twitter is democratic the way that East Berlin was democratic. It's in name only under the current leadership. And so I think what Elon Musk is doing, and the reason that so many people in power today are acting like stuck pigs over the mere prospect that Musk might be purchasing this property, is because they know that if he purchases it, he will implement policies that will effectively allow for people of all stripes and colors to have their voices heard on this very powerful medium. And that is a threat to what Jordan just referred to as the San Francisco cartel. They cannot have ordinary people or even, famous people who are of the right having a fair, free shot at free speech. It just cannot be allowed. And so that's why you're seeing the reaction from the left the way it is, only because he's even thinking about purchasing Twitter, and in so doing allow for the right to have the same basic freedom of speech that the Constitution allows them to have, and that they've been denied for far too long. And so this is a huge issue for the left, and that's why they're attacking him so vehemently, and why he needs to press ahead with this. He's now sort of committed. He cannot back out now. He has got to finish this purchase, because the knives are out for him, and they're not going to stop until they destroy him.
方伟，您对他刚才 Brandon 也讲到，就是说他做到这一步，他已经不能回头了。那您对他收购推特这些，觉得会有哪些障碍呢？他必须要跨过的。
这个现在障碍就是价钱，因为440亿确实价位太高了，特别在这个特斯拉的股价跌下来之后，那么他能不能顺利的完成这次收购哈，我觉得都是可能是一个问题。所以呢，现在大家都是说，对啊，他最后能买得成吗？如果他钱不够怎么办哈？我觉得现在这个整个的这个股市啊拖下来，加上这个包括说左派对他打压，我觉得左派现在在做一个围剿战，试图把他的这个财富往下压，搞到他最后没有办法去买这个事情，买这个推特，所以呢，我觉得现在最大的问题就是他怎么能够最终把该要的价钱谈下来，并且把这个价钱背后的这个需要的钱可以拿得出来，能把它买下来。这是主要的障碍。那么现在真的是就是现在一场大戏，因为你不知道明天会怎么样，你不知道股市会怎么样，熊市多快能回来，6月份会不会回头？那么现在呢，就整个在这个过程中吧，我觉得是一个怎么讲，就是充满了变数哈，也是充满了你去考验这个伊隆马斯克的智慧。我觉得他是非常非常聪明的一个人，在这个商业上，所以真的一场 reality show 哈，一场这个实景的一个怎么讲故事片在上演。
Let's say he successfully buys Twitter. To me, there's 3 big problems that he has to deal with. The first is, now of course Trump said that he's not going to come back, but Elon said he will restore Twitter. Brendan, what's your view on that aspect after if Elon successfully buys Twitter?
I think that if Donald Trump is serious about running again, I think that if he's serious about being a dynamic player in the political field going forward, he would be a fool not to restore his Twitter feed, which is the main reason why he was able to break through the media blockade on him in 2016 and get the nomination for the GOP. And it's one of the main reasons why he was able to win in 2016. And so I think that, he should take Elon up on that offer if he's serious. If he's not, he's going to keep doing what he's doing because he's not helping himself or the movement that he started by sort of isolating away. I think him and Elon need to now come together and become sort of natural allies because they're going to either hang together or hang separately because the left, like I said, is not going to let either of those two men sort of go quietly into the night. This is it. Elon especially has declared open war on the dominant left, and they are not going to let him, go quietly and go back to the way things were before he said he wanted to buy Twitter.
方伟，您对这件事情怎么看？现在有好多的社交媒体就是冲着推特来的，但是呢，如果川普回到了推特，或者他不想回去这件事情，
如果你要我猜的话哈，我觉得不管川普现在在说什么，在外面说什么，他心里挺高兴的。他现在这个 Truth Social 川普的粉丝是270万。好，那么现在马斯克去买这个推特，如果买下来的话，对川普来说，我觉得他有2个用途。第一个呢，他直接跑到那边去做广告，大家来用这边吧，那边他有8800万人，我想现在丢了大概也许丢了1-2千万人，起码还6-7千万人，那是20-30倍哈。那么而马斯克什么态度呢？马斯克你知道我不知道你看没看哈？有一个推友就跟他说，这个川普跑来跟大家嚷嚷一下，说这个叫做什么来着？真相传媒更好，大家都过去。伊朗马斯克说，但是没关系，他doesn't mind at all， 因为他的 principle 哈，他的 goal 就是言论自由，他 enable 这个东西，所以呢，川普可以把推特当作他的广告平台，而伊朗马斯克是不介意的，所以对川普来说，进可攻，退可守。如果他的真相社媒很好的话，他在那边去嚷嚷，把人流导过来，这个推特作为这个真相社媒的一个上端漏斗 ，Why not？ 不挺好吗？如果不好用的话，选举到了关键时刻，他还是回到推特去做，他完全有这个空间。马斯克买推特绝对给川普一个进可攻、退可守的一个位置。
Other than that, what other aspects of Twitter do you think are going to be changed when Elon buys it? The acquisition is complete, Jordan.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's this enormous censorship regime where, I've reported on the pandemic the past couple of years pretty extensively, and there are some things that you can't say on Twitter, and Twitter says it's for reasons of, violating health misinformation, and now you can't talk about the war between Russia and Ukraine in a certain way. There are these very particular narratives that the people who run Twitter enforce that are utterly ridiculous. And these are categories in which there should be a robust debate. And Twitter has censored the debate to the point where they're basically just removing everyone who has a voice that is contrary to the ruling class narrative. So I think when Elon Musk comes on, hopefully with his ownership stake, that he will kind of like reduce this censorship to basically, if you threaten people or say something like completely insane and ridiculous and threatening, like it should really only be that. It should be a protected platform for free speech. There should be no, misinformation policy or this is how you can comment on wars. That stuff is so ridiculous. So I hope that stuff all gets rolled back under new management.
自从他说他要买推特以后，其实在之前啊，就是左派是比较喜欢马斯克的，因为他有这个动力的这个车队啊，他是再生能源都是左派这个叫 ES 比较喜欢的东西。可他现在突然为什么对马斯克这个人180度转过来攻击他了呢？
这话题背后可以看出很多东西。左派为什么以前喜欢他呢？因为他在政治上他并不表明他清晰的态度。OK， 他在政治上他是不清晰表态的。德州的堕胎案出来之后，人家问马斯克，你说你什么态度？他说我还是不谈吧。他不谈，他不表达他对这种社会敏感问题的看法。所以呢，当然左派原来很喜欢他的左右都吃，他两边都捐款你去查他的那个捐款记录这个民主党、共和党这个候选人和这个两个党本身的机构他全捐。 他是个生意人，两边都吃，所以呢，人家以前看不清他怎么回事。那么这是第一点。第二点呢，他的那个电动车很符合这个环保哈，这些东西他们就喜欢他。马斯克今天是被极左派逼过去的，因为他有一些很基本的东西，就是说言论自由这个事情，你封杀人家言论，cancel掉人家，那么做到这么过火，然后呢？然后他最近，你看他最近看到的那个这个通俄门嘛，我们都觉得很多通俄门我们都很知道。他说到上个月才看到，他就很生气啊。
对，
他说我给希拉里、克林顿捐那么多钱，啊，他说他拿我的钱去搞这个名堂，所以他就很生气。所以马斯克在过去呢，看到极左派叫做已经走得太远了，这里还包括那个 ESG 的事情，所以呢是现实让马斯克觉得左派太过分了，所以他才发那个推说。民主党是叫做什么分裂和仇恨的党，所以呢这件事情呢，其实我觉得对于极左派来说，他们意识不到是他们把他推过去的。这个人本来是一个正常的美国人，他美国移民吧，好吧，正常的美国人，他其实根本没有清晰的站位，但是这个形势，我觉得会把所有的正常的美国人都推到右边去，马斯克其中一个人。
Brendan, I want to ask you about the right. What does the right see in Musk? What do you think the people see in Elon Musk on the right side, though?
Well, I think that the biggest thing right now is his defense of free speech, his calls to restore President Trump's Twitter feed, even if the former president doesn't want to go back to Twitter. I think they see in Musk this very kind of figure of pop culture who's actually talking about things that the right cares about, not just defense of free speech, but promoting products the right likes. I mentioned before the Babylon Bee. This is a big thing that he's a fan of. So I think that there's a lot of a sense of a fellow traveler in Musk, even if at times he's not supporting things or doing things the right always agrees with, for instance, his belief in global warming. The bottom line is that on many of the key issues of our time now, Musk is clearly more in line with the right. And the fact that he came out recently and explicitly said he will be voting for the Republican candidate in 2024. He made a big target on his back, even more so when he basically sort of told the world that the emperor had no clothes when he said that President Biden is not the man running the country, that it's whoever is writing the speeches for the teleprompter that is running the country in actuality, because Biden is clearly not mentally fit. And so these things are things that the right understandably believes and feels assured that Musk is coming out and publicly saying the part that we think quietly, he's saying it out loud. And so all of that sort of congeals into this popular support on the right for him.
Jordan, as a journalist, what do you see is the role of Twitter when it comes to impacting or influencing the fourth estate in the sense that previously we just talked about how influential Twitter is to the American people, but what's your view on that to journalists and news media?
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a relationship between the news media and the corporation that is Twitter, and a lot of it happens behind the scenes, similar to how the government, the U.S. government corresponds with Twitter. We know they have a very active relationship, and we know that there's definitely preferential treatment given to the corporate press and the U.S. government in curating potential narratives that the people at Twitter agree with. When the government reaches out to Twitter, it's usually because they want to censor someone. And when the news media gets curated on Twitter, it's usually because Twitter likes what they're saying and they're preserving and pushing a narrative. This happened all the time the last couple of years from COVID stuff, is that whenever you saw something in the New York Times or Washington Post, and it was a fearful narrative or a pro-lockdown narrative, the people at Twitter would put it in the curated sections, in the top of the feeds of people who followed these press outlets, or even people who were just interested in the category. So they try to, that Twitter pushes out their signal as much as they can to kind of off balance what you could deem the right or the individual liberty, free speech crowd. They much prefer this establishment narrative on in a variety of fields.
我觉得有一点大家要注意哈，这个推特这个平台，它不光是一个信息传播平台，它非常非常强大的 enable 了哈，就是叫做放大了个体媒体工作者的这个新闻工作者的作用。这马斯克自己也这么说啊，人家问他说你相信什么样的媒体？这年头大家都在说什么媒体我能相信？马斯克说我相信 citizen journalist， 我相信这叫做公民记者。他说公民记者在推特上勤勤恳恳的发消息，然后含金量很高，然后频度很大，你就像个树一样的会长起来。那么最后呢，你就会有一个自己的一个耕种，你就变成了一个小媒体，后来变成一个中媒体，甚至变成一个大媒体。所以在这一点上的话，美国的这个新闻第四权哈，这个新闻的第四权，在推特上是很大程度上被推特这个把它巩固住了。那而这个马斯克自己，他其实我以前讲过一句话，我相信这是对的。他为什么买推特哈？除了他觉得推特太不像话之外，因为他太喜欢推特了。他真的很喜欢推特。他从2012年开始用，他到现在10年发了17000个推，已经快18000个推了。这个人就是天天在那推，天下第一推。以前就是跟川普有的一拼哈，但川普比他还是多了，但是他已经是就是很喜欢这个东西。他看到一个 citizen journalist， 甚至就是一个 citizen， 可以通过推特把他的声音放大，把他的思想放大得很大。所以在这一点上呢，他看到了推特对美国社会的重要性和对这个未来的选举。
Brendan, I want to ask you, what do you see is going to be sort of a tactic the left's going to use to attack Elon? We've seen the sexual harassment it's becoming a playbook formula now, right? We've seen the sexual harassment. We have the return, the counteroffensive, which is the Project Veritas's expose video on the Twitter employee. We'll talk about that in a bit. There's also what we now know is both sides are kind of playing out this almost like a big stage drama show to see who can get the more influence and more shock values out of the other sides. What do you see is going to happen to Elon and the attack on him?
Well, we've already seen this, the left kind of played their hand a little bit last year. If you remember, Elon Musk came out last year in favor of the GameStonk controversy, which was basically where a bunch of private investors tried to save the video gaming store GameStop from what they thought were unfair practices by the big hedge funds. And it started to work back then. When Elon Musk lent his voice in favor of that against the sort of dominant elite, what happened was the very next day, the FAA randomly canceled one of his scheduled launches from Boca Chica, Texas, which is where the SpaceX is testing their new Starship that's supposed to get us to Mars. And they canceled it. And that was intended to send a message to Elon Musk: don't meddle in things that you don't belong meddling in. Shortly thereafter, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, NHTSA, under the DOJ, launched a massive lawsuit against Tesla, which started recalling, I think it was Model S's, because part of their rear view screen weren't working properly, and they said that constituted a safety hazard. So that cost Tesla billions of dollars. This was all being done in response to politically unsavory things that the left and the elites and the Biden administration didn't like. And so they were using these sort of unorthodox regulatory means to punish Musk, to go after his wallet. We've already seen in the aftermath of his attempts to buy Twitter, you now see that he's losing billions of dollars, not only because of the Business Insider story about these unverified sexual harassment claims, but also because of the ESG, this new fund or this new index they're using. They're going after him, saying that, well, he doesn't qualify anymore for being listed on that. And so now you see sort of elite culture is rallying together to go against anything owned by Musk, and they're trying to basically ensure that he is damaged financially and publicly so badly that he can't ever threaten them again. And with the SpaceX example, anytime the FAA starts canceling these launches, it's important to remember we are in a space race with China to get to Mars. It is a prestige thing. It's also a matter, we've talked about this before, David, it's also a matter of national security. So every time that the FAA comes down and stymies these very important launches that SpaceX is trying to do for other issues, it's a damaging effect to our national security and our competitive edge against China. So now you have the regulatory state not only going after Musk for political issues, but now it's having real-world national security implications, which could damage us in the much longer run.
Jordan, I want to ask you about the ESG scores. I'm sure the people we have today were all unqualified for that. But he got kicked out. Tesla got kicked out of the ESG ecosystem, I guess. The American version of the social credit system for companies. How do you feel about the situation with Tesla, a company that used to be so cherished and championed for its ESG capabilities and availabilities?
Well, ESG was created and is maintained basically as a mafia thought policing investment vehicle. And the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard use this ESG terminology to block outside access to investment funds. And this is great for business for them because they can continue to buy up seats on influential boards and have retail investors continue to invest tons of money in their ETFs and other forms of equity. ESG is a total scam, and I think the Tesla being removed from the ESG, the S&P ESG group, just goes to show that none of this really has anything to do with the environment. It's just a mafia to keep competition out, and it allows for the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard to have power over tens of trillions of dollars, which it can use to push other companies into this ESG window where they need to accommodate all of this political stupidity that ends up just increasing their share of the entire global market.
方明先生，您对这个 ESG 这件事情怎么看呢？他是不是因为马斯克买推特这件事情而造成他的公司特斯拉被从这个系统被删除呢？
我个人的看法和观察哈，我觉得就是的。delisting 这件事情啊，就是在马斯克背后捅他一刀。那么这件事情呢，当然我们知道是表面上看是 S&P 道琼这个公司他所发动的哈，他讲的理由就是用我们台湾话叫做有的没的哈，就那种很犄角旮旯的小理由，然后把它弄掉，然后这个生产石油的公司在这个 ESG 的 list 上高在那挂着哈。这是因为特斯拉它是一个革新性的、革命性的把这个电动车推到大众的。在2005年到06年，那美国政府那个时候也想去搞这个名堂，根本是搞不出来。所以完全是马斯克先开创的，开创到后来，联邦政府才给他钱，让他才助他一把力。但是整个的 idea 是马斯克最先拿出来的，最后把它产品化，把它商业化，把它大众化。那么今天才有这个电动车，简直是扫荡性的革新这个汽车工业这一点。那么对于这样一个公司，居然把它从这个 ESG 拿下来，就是个笑话，是个大笑话。而且拿下来的理由非常非常的这个叫做犄角旮旯的一个理由哈。所以就是不成其为理由，但是呢，因为刚才两位嘉宾说的哈 ，ESG 的那个指数，很多这个所谓的环境这个叫做什么环境友好的指数哈，基金他就买这个东西，结果你把马斯克拿掉的话，我看到一个 source 哈，最起码会影响到110亿的这个买这个 ESG 指数的 fund， 他们那天就会 dump， 这是上个星期三的事情，上个星期三特斯拉跌掉8%。我看到一个这个叫做金融分析师，他说3%，其中1/3，8%的1/3是来自于这110亿的共同基金买 ESG 指数的，他们把他的公司甩卖掉，因为它是自动的，所以呢，我觉得背后就是对马斯克的一个，我觉得2重围剿哈，一种是金融围剿。最开始呢，他刚是买的时候，我当时预计到会不会有所谓的叫做什么 white knight 啊，就是这个左派的钱会进来跟他去竞价。那么没有进来，因为这个单它出价太高，440亿，所以没有人愿意掏钱干这么个事儿哈。因为推特它是个赔钱货哈，
对，
它不赚钱那么没有那件事情。现在呢，就是第一想把马斯克的钱把它搞垮， 那么这让他买不成。第二呢，就是对他的声誉进行围剿。这个第二招呢，我觉得以后还会再又再跑出来一个女生如何，但是我觉得这一招很难，用过很多次了，很难有任何的信誉哈。但是对他财务上的攻击，对他金融上的攻击，这个确实是一个很厉害的。你刚才我说了，他的唯一的障碍就是钱，
对，他
有足够多的钱就买下来了，买下来之后就是他的了，剩下他就可以说了算啊。那么现在呢，对他的攻击就是在着落在他的特斯拉的这个，因为他是唯一的上市公司嘛，在背后是有钱的，对他的一个攻击，所以这是真的是一个左派下手的一个地方。
其实我们知道真相工程这件事情是一个反而对他比较有利，在买推特上，就是他这个有一个推特的员工，他们是说在硅谷啊，在这个高科技这个领域上，对马斯克对他来讲是很讨厌他。
The rest of us who have been here believe in something that's good for the planet and not just to give people free speech. It's going to be hard for him to be like, oh, because people should make their own decision. It's like, no, but people don't know how to make a rational decision if you don't put out correct things that are supposed to be out in the public.
那您觉得这件事情爆出来以后，他对这个买推特本身会有什么影响？
我觉得那2个录像哈，它其实在网上流传的是不长，一个大概几分钟哈。我建议大家看一看，我看的都是有点目瞪口呆。那么他把这个推特内部的这个真相就揪出来了。那么简单的说，就说推特就是我们就是一帮社会主义者，我们也不在乎赚钱，我们有一个理念，这个理念是拯救地球。大众都不知道真相，只有大众都不知道什么是对的，什么是错的，我们才知道。所以我们当然要封杀我们认为不正确的东西。这就是这帮人的这个认识。他们说我们都是一帮，他说我们是一帮共产主义者，就左到远远超过大家的想象。好，那么这个消息出来之后，马斯克针对他的动作，我觉得造成2个效果。第一个呢，他真的叫 trash 这个推特，把推特的声誉现在打到就是毁掉。推特的就是因为他以前封杀呢，他不敢表面说，他还是不断的辩解说我是公正的，这个那个的。那么马斯克和真相工程的这2个这个录像出来之后，马斯克的这个发话，现在真的是把推特的信誉打掉。这个推特现在无论卖不卖掉，他已经是信誉被重创了，这是第一个效果。第2个效果，大家都期待马斯克你买吧，你买的话，我们还会 restore 对推特的信心的，对不对？所以这个东西对他非常有利。所以我觉得这是一件好事情。当然说白了就是一个真相的一个揭露嘛。真相揭露，我觉得阳光出来没有黑暗的角落哈。阳光出来总是有好效果，所以对马斯克是有好处的。对于他，我觉得公众的支持吧，公众的支持有好处。对于他进一步毁掉推特的目前叫做当前版推特的实力，我觉得也是很有帮助的。所以我觉得我看好这件事情是一个 good thing that happened.
What do you think if the acquisition goes complete and successful? What do you think that's going to do to the big tech environment in Silicon Valley as well as around the country?
Well, the first thing is I'm actually not convinced it's going to go through. I'm still thinking the DOJ is going to step in and there's going to be some kind of new regulation that's going to prevent this from going forward. But if it does, I think it's going to be a huge spike in the heart that is the left-wing dominance of big tech. It's unfortunate that we can't rely on sort of an even playing field enforced by the government, but that's just the way it is right now for big tech. They have pretty much left-wing domination. So if Musk is somehow able to pull this off, and he gets what he wants and he takes the company over, I think that it will be a huge problem for the left. It will certainly divide their otherwise firm monopoly on the truth, on communication, and on messaging for political purposes. And that could actually make Republicans, even in spite of themselves, Republicans more competitive going forward, which would be a huge net benefit for the country.
If Elon Musk is able to secure Twitter and get over all of the hurdles, I think like for the San Francisco tech scene, this is big trouble for them. I live in South Florida now, and so many of those companies are moving over to Miami and Austin, Texas, and it just goes to show that these toxic, authoritarian, leftist policies, the American people are rejecting it, and there aren't going to be any jobs for anyone in Silicon Valley if they keep pushing forward with this agenda. So, I would love to see nothing more than for Twitter to be taken over and for that Elon Musk suggested that the San Francisco office be turned into a homeless shelter because nobody shows up to work because they're afraid, because of COVID, I guess, that they don't want to come to the workplace anymore. So there's this like dying breed of like leftist authoritarianism in the tech space. And I'm very encouraged by, the complete dissolution. No one really wants to live in that scene anymore. And hopefully, my fellow Floridians will have awareness to not let them into our tech scene too, because it just shows how dangerous they are to your local community. So while I'm happy that a lot of the San Francisco tech scene, a lot of smart people are moving down here, there's also the downside of do we really want all these Twitter employees in Florida now? But I am hopeful that Elon Musk will take over Twitter. I think he's had a personal political evolution over. I've been following for a while over these last couple decades, and I think that he has actually changed significantly his worldview, and that's probably the major reason that is motivating him to buy Twitter and kind of restore free speech on the internet. And I'm very hopeful that progress continues.
对我觉得美国极左派哈，对美国的 virtually take over 哈，对美国的这样一个就是抢攻美国吧，他们所有的效果现在碰到了一个他们意想不到的一个半路杀出个程咬金哈，他们意想不到撞见马斯克，马斯克是用他的常识，来抵抗这件事情的。马斯克不是一个政治活动家，他也不是一个 conservative 保守派的人士，他也不是个右翼，他也不是个共和党人。那么马斯克是用他的常识看到这个荒谬的程度，变成这个样子，所以马斯克用他的本能、他的坦率和他的实力来抵抗。那么这个人又是一个超级英雄，在美国人看来，对，这是个超级英雄，对不对？
钢铁侠真人版。
对呀，结果就左派，就极左派，我说极左派哈，真的是撞到一个他们不想碰见的敌人。而马斯克在美国有很多的粉丝，在高科技界也是。你现在说那个推特哈，他的工程师95%都是极左派。你要知道，现在给推特交简历的，想去推特上班的这个人数，比上个月成长270%。很多人都跟马斯克，很多人想跟着他干。那么他的那个特斯拉的也是非常非常受欢迎，那个 rating 是100个人，100张 resume 进去，只有1个人可以录取的。所以很多人都很喜欢他，他对于美国的年轻人、对美国的公众有很大的带动作用。现在是左派不小心，其实是必然的，把他逼成了这个左派、这个极左派的敌人。那么往后展现的一切，好几条线、好几条这个戏都会演哈，我觉得是非常有意思。那也能够把美国的价值之争彰显在全美国人民的这个面前，让大家去看、去判断、去选择。所以我觉得它的意义在这个地方。
今天感谢3位嘉宾的精彩分析，这里是精英论坛，我是 David， 我们下次节目再见。